Hey everyone. So today we're going to move on to Unit 7, Day 9 notes, which is basically reviewing everything we know about quadratic functions, okay? So number one, we are not going to work out. I'm just going to go ahead and give you the answer. The answer for this one is the letter B. Uh, don't worry, we are going to do two other problems that are basically the same type of problem like number one, okay? With that being said, go ahead and flip to the next page. So number two, okay, what is an equation of the function graph below? So basically we're trying to match this graph to one of these equations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my key features to be able to eliminate three of those answer choices. So if you think back to when we were talking about linear functions, when we were matching those graphs to those equations, we would basically look at the slope, look at the y-intercept, and then identify which equation matched ours. It's basically the same idea here. The only difference is that we're going to be looking at, we could look at the y-intercept, the axis of symmetry, the minimum, the vertex, the x-intercepts. We could be looking at all of them or just maybe one or two. It just depends, okay? So typically when I'm looking at these problems, I typically start out with identifying the y-intercept. So my y-intercept is -2, okay? So I'm going to go through and identify which of these answer choices I can eliminate. Clearly, answer choice A does not have a y-intercept of -2, so it's not A. If you look at C, same thing, we have a y-intercept plus 2, so it's not C. So now I'm down to either B or D, okay? The next thing I typically like to look at is the axis of symmetry. If you notice, my axis of symmetry for this graph, okay, is right in the middle because it cuts the parabola in half. So that means my axis of symmetry is 0. So let's start with answer choice B. We know to be able to find the axis of symmetry, we can say negative b over 2a. Okay, so this is A, this is B, and this is C. So if I plug in my correct values into the correct variable, I should get -4, because we have a negative, and then the letter B is -4, divided by 2 times 2. So negative times the -4 is a +4. 2 times 2 is 4. And 4 divided by 4 is just 1. So my axis of symmetry is 1. So clearly that's not my answer because we're looking for the graph or the equation that will have an axis of symmetry of 0. Now let's look at D. Okay. If you notice, I don't have a letter B. So I can rewrite this quadratic equation to look like y equals 2x squared plus 0x minus 2. And remember, anytime that the letter B is 0 or there isn't a letter B, then we can assume that the axis of symmetry is going to be 0. And if you forgot why we can make that assumption, let me go ahead and work the problem out. So the axis of symmetry can be found using negative b over 2a. Then b is 0. So -0 over 2 times 2. So 0 divided by 4, because 2 times 2 is 4, will just give me 0 divided by 4 will just be 0. So my answer is D. Okay. Let's move on to another one that looks basically the same. Which is an equation of the function graphed below? Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with the y-intercept. So if you notice, the y-intercept is going to be -10. So looking at my answer choices, I can eliminate B and C because those two quadratic equations have a y-intercept of +10, okay? Now looking at A and looking at D, I could do the axis of symmetry, okay? But if you notice, look at A and look at D. The value a, they're both different. One is a positive 2, the other one's a negative 2. And if you notice, your parabola opens down. So I know that my letter A value has to be a negative number because the parabola is opening down. Okay? So that means I have to choose the answer choice that has the letter A, or the leading coefficient in front of the x squared, to be a negative. And by elimination, the only answer choice that has a negative A and a y-intercept of negative 10 is answer choice D. A doesn't work because the 2 is positive. And because the 2 is positive, we know that the parabola will open up, which is different than what we are shown on this graph. So the answer is not A, is answer choice D. Okay, let's move on to the next set of questions. Number 4, we are going to work out using Desmos. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and open another tab, or get a tablet, or get your phone, or whatever you're using to be able to get to Desmos, go ahead and do that. So they're basically asking me which function has a minimum at the point -2, -3. So in other words, they're asking me where can which of these answer choices has a vertex of -2, -3. So let's start. Okay, answer choice A, we have parentheses x minus 2 parentheses square minus 3. If you click your vertex, you get +2, -3. Okay. Clearly, that's not the answer we're looking for, so it's not A. Okay. Let's start, move on to answer choice B. My vertex for that is 2, 3. Clearly, that's not the answer choice because we're looking for the one that has -2, -3. Let's move on to answer choice C. The vertex for answer choice C is -2, +3. Which clearly is not the answer. But let's double check that the answer has to be D. And there you go. The vertex is -2, -3 for answer choice D. So answer choice D is the equation that has a vertex at that point. Okay, let's move on. Number 5. James kicked the ball off the ground into the air. The function h of t models the height and feet of the ball t seconds after it was kicked. How long did it take the ball to hit the ground after being kicked? So, hit the ground. Okay. So how long did it take for it to hit the ground? Okay. So they're asking me for when the ball went back to the ground. And you know, anytime I think about the ground, I think about the word roots. So we are looking for the zeros, also known as the x-intercepts. Okay? So first thing I need to do is I need to take this equation, -16x squared minus 40x. Remember, they use t, but I prefer to use x because I do get very confused with the t's. It just confuses me and throws me off because sometimes my t's might look like plus signs, and it's just easier for me to use x. Okay, so first thing I need to do is factor this equation. So first thing you always do is check for a GCF. Clearly my GCF is -8x. So -16 divided by -8 is 2. And then x squared divided by x is just x. Then negative 40 divided by negative 8, and that's supposed to be a plus. Positive 40 divided by negative 8 is a negative 5. And then x divided by x just goes away. There's nothing left. Now, you check and make sure that you have an x squared, okay? And we don't, because this is linear and this is linear. If you notice, both the x's just have exponents of 1. If I had, 2x squared plus 5x minus 5, then I can do the t-chart, or I can try to throw the number back, throw it to the back, and then go ahead and do the t-chart. But if you notice, that's all I had to do was my GCF. There was nothing else. I have factored this down to its lowest form, okay? So now that I have factored it, I can go ahead and set it equal to 0, do my zipper, and give each item its own equals 0. And now I can solve. The opposite of multiplying by negative 8 is to divide by negative 8. So x equals 8, because 0 divided by negative 8 is 0. Then for this equation, the opposite of a minus 5 is a plus 5. So 2x equals 5. And then the opposite of multiplying by 2 is to divide by 2. So 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. Okay. And remember that you can use Desmos as a regular calculator. So it's not just for graphing. You could, let's say you're having a hard time dividing 5 divided by 2. You can just say 5 divided by 2, and it gives you the answer, okay, 2.5. So it works just like a normal calculator, like our yellow calculator. So let's say you want to do 2 squared minus 6 squared times 3, and it gives you the answer. You see? So just know that if you want to do some basic math, like adding, subtracting, or dividing, or anything with squares and square roots, you can actually use Desmos as a regular calculator. Just type in what you want, and it will do it for you, okay? Let's move on to the next problem. Okay. Which is the equation for the axis of symmetry of y equals x squared minus 4x minus 12? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and find the vertex using Desmos. Okay, so go ahead and get to Desmos, type in that equation. So we have x squared minus 4x minus 12. And if you click the vertex is 2, negative 16. Now, if you remember, the vertex is made up of 2 parts. The x value is the axis of symmetry, and the y value is basically the min or the max value. And in this case, it's a minimum value. They were asking me for the axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry is 2. Okay. Number 7. We're also going to use Desmos. A ball is thrown into the air at an initial velocity of 24 feet per second. The function h of t represents the height in feet of the ball after t seconds. What is the maximum height of the ball? So first thing, if you notice, they gave us the initial velocity of 24. That is just the letter b in the quadratic equation. It's really not important at all. They're just telling you what the 24 stands for. That's all, okay? So don't even worry about it being the initial velocity. Don't think it's like the initial value or anything like that, okay? It's just extra. It's just some extra piece of information that they're giving you to try and see if you can confuse yourself, okay? But the question is simple. What is the maximum height? So we know that when we're looking for the height, okay, we want to know how high the ball went. So we're looking for the y value of the vertex. Okay, so I'm going to go to Desmos, type in the equation. Okay, so we have negative 16 x squared plus 24x plus 5. Okay, and if we click the vertex, because that's the highest point, we get 0.7514. Okay, so the vertex is 0.75 and 14. So we know that the x value is the axis of symmetry, and in this case is the time, which they told us was in seconds. And this is the height, or the max height, which of course is in feet. So they asked us what is the max height, which is the y value of the vertex. So the answer will be 14 feet. Okay. Number 9. How many times does the graph of the equation f of x intersect the x-axis? So in other words, they're asking me how many x-intercepts do we have, or how many zeros, okay, or how many roots. So let's type in our equation, and if you notice, this parabola crosses the x-axis twice. So how many times does it cross, or how many times does it intersect, or how many x-intercepts do we have? We have 2. Okay. And just write down that we did it on Desmos in case you're confused as to what we did. And if you need a picture, this is what it would look like. One, two. Okay. But it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Okay. Let's move on to the next page. Number 10, we're not going to work it out. They are asking me for the x-intercepts of the graph. You can use Desmos, but the answer is going to be C. Okay? And the last one, number 12. The vertex form of the graph of quadratic function is shown below. Which of the following equations shows the function in standard form? So in other words, they're just asking me to get rid of the parentheses, okay? So if you notice this set of parentheses, the x plus 3 square, is telling me that I have 2 sets of that. So if I rewrite it as 3 times x plus 3 times x plus 3 minus 2, I can see that I can just work this out. So start with the distributive property. I always go from left to right. So 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 3 is 9. Then bring down the rest of the problem. Okay. Now I can do the double distributor property because remember this is a binomial times a binomial. So 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 3 is 9x. 9 times x is 9x. 9 times 3 is 27. Then bring down your minus 2. Now I can combine like terms. Okay? 3x squared can just be brought down. 9x plus 9x is 18x. And then 27 minus 2 is positive 25. So now we are in standard form because it looks just like a standard form quadratic equation. Ax squared plus bx plus c. And clearly that will be answer choice C. Okay. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. You can email me, text me, or send me a message through the Remind app, okay?